Hello everyone, welcome to Winthrop in the World. I'm Paul Baskin, and with us today is our state representative, Jeff Turco. It's your third visit here. I'm really grateful for you doing it. It's obviously very important for the people of the town to hear from you, being our state official here in town, or main state official here in town.
Thank you for the invitation, and I'm honored to be here.
Yeah, so I hate to say it, but I mean, 3A, the housing thing is still, I mean, there's other things we want to talk about, but let's just get to that because that continues to be, for whatever reason, a big issue in town. Again, that's the housing law. That's the town council in Winthrop has not approved compliance. It's sort of a dwindling number of towns in the Boston area that are not compliant with 3A. Winthrop is still one of them. You can debate whether we're losing grant money or not. It seems like historically the town has gotten state money and is not eligible for some categories of it now. Maybe we start with just a basic summary of where you see us on that right now and what the prospects are for some kind of solution.
Well, I mean, I think where we have an election coming up in November, and the people of the town will decide which direction they want to go. We have one set of candidates that's clearly running, saying that they oppose 3A and they want to continue to have Winthrop controlling its own destiny. You have another set of candidates on the other side. Essentially, it's come down to two sides, let's face it.
Yeah.
And you have one side that's says whatever the Commonwealth wants, they want to do, build, baby, build. Okay. And those people are relying, frankly, shockingly, are relying on out-of-town activists coming in here, people from the governor's PAC, people from political operatives from around the state being invited in to go door to door and to help spread the message of the pro-3A side. And I think the people of Winthrop are going to have to decide, are they offended by that? First election in my 21 years living in Winthrop, where one side of an election has called in the troops from outside the town to try to sway the voter of Winthrop. And
okay, so a lot in there. So there are no out-of-town people involved in the anti-3A side?
No, you look at who's supporting the anti-3A side. They're Winthrop people advocating for what they believe is Winthrop's best interest. And I haven't seen one outsider coming into town saying, here's why you should support candidate A or candidate B because they're against 3A. But on the flip side of it, there certainly is a lot of misinformation, a lot of outright lies. And I don't blame the candidates per se, but I think the candidates have an obligation to Winthrop to say we don't want outsiders trying to persuade our town. We have forums like you, thankfully, host candidates to be able to talk about their vision of the town. We have a council president debate. People should get up and talk about what they think is best for the town. Jim and Hannah can handle their own. They don't need outside activists coming in here trying to hoodwink the people of Winthrop with their views where they're being bought and paid for by outside developers and outside parties.
And just because I haven't heard a lot about this, who are these outside parties you're saying that are doing this?
I think if you look at people online, they're saying we're doing days of action, for a particular candidate. Let's meet in Winthrop and go door to door to promote a particular pro-3A candidate. And those people I got a phone call last week from someone with the 401 Rhode Island area code saying, will you please support this candidate for council president? It's appalling.
I see.
You want to ask somebody for my vote, it be somebody from Winthrop that can talk to me about why they think one candidate or the other is better for Winthrop.
Yeah, I see. Okay. And as far the town council president here in Winthrop does oppose compliance with 3A, but he's also said pretty clearly that the plan put forth by the town planners would not increase housing in the town. Is that your understanding as well? That's accurate?
Frankly, I haven't taken the time to delve into the specific planning board plan. I know that's what the planning board and that's what the people that are pushing the pro-development side have said. But I think what the council president has been very clear about is that every document the Commonwealth has produced, the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities has produced, says right on it that it's subject to change, based on their mood at the time effectively.
Right.
And I've talked directly to Secretary Augustus, and the Secretary's made clear. I said to him, Mr. Secretary, at the end of this process, if every community complies with the MBTA Communities Act on paper, and you build no new units, is that a success? He said, no, we need 225,000 units.
Right.
People that claim that this is a no-build plan, are not paying attention to what's happening. You look at what the Secretary is doing right now with the housing authorities. You look at what the Secretary is doing right now with the ADU law, broadly expanding it beyond anything the legislature talked about through regulation. they have a singular mission at the Executive Office of Housing and Livability Communities to destroy small town America. And you're seeing that, and even small town I use for Winthrop, but I think you also look, for example, at Medford right now in Somerville. You own a single family home, you'll live the American dream to buy in a nice neighborhood, and all of a sudden they get rid of the zoning and they say somebody can build, your neighbor can build lot line to lot line a 5-story building.
Right.
That's the goal, ladies and gentlemen. That's what they want for Winthrop and every other community around here, except, of course, for Dover, Sherburne, Weston, and Wellesley. The rich people, they'll never go after them. But it's the working class communities like Winthrop that they just, for some reason, have it out for us.
So to be clear on your answer to the question I asked, which is whether 3A, as it is now, requires any new housing in town, the answer is no, right? There doesn't.
No, I totally disagree with that. I think you could get, first of all, it's kind of a cute thing that when the original planning board plan came out and it talked about Governor's Park and Fort Heath and Sail Harbor, and also talked about Morton Street, right. And a couple of the pro 3A crowd, some of whom are actually paid activists for 3A, they realized that their home was in the 3A district. And what did they do? They went out and said to the planning board, oh, you got to take our homes out. We don't want 3A in our neighborhood. It's okay for everyone else's neighborhood. And so there's nothing that prevents, for example, if 3A was zoned in where Fort Heath is, for the owners of Fort Heath to go and sit down and look at architectural plans and say, can we add more units here? Can we add more density because of this new zoning law? Right. I don't know what the answer is. I'm not an architect and I'm not a zoning expert. But the idea that it's guaranteed to be zero is just, I think respectfully, is just not a correct statement.
But the plan does limit it to those 3 areas that already have multifamily housing. Is that correct?
Oh, I mean, it would designate the area as of now for Fort Heath, Sail Harbor, and Governor's Park.
Which already have
all privately owned.
Which already have multifamily housing
Correct.
in them, right? Okay. So a lot of effort is put into I guess a lot of the political argument relies on you. A couple of bills, at least 2 bills, I guess, that you put in, 3 bills that you put in. One would be an outright repeal of 3A. One would be the other 2, I think, are sort of give Winthrop some kind of clearer exemption than it currently has. Is that the way to think of them?
Yeah. So I mean, one of the bills would be an outright repeal of 3A. One of them would say that if we're a community like Winthrop, any of the 177 communities like Winthrop that have complied with the safe harbor provisions of Chapter 40B, the affordable housing law that's been on the books for decades, that if we're exempt from 40B because we've reached the safe harbor, we should be exempt from 3A because we've done our part.
Okay.
And all the evidence I've seen is that Winthrop has complied with 40B and we're exempt.
Okay.
And therefore we should be exempt as well under the MBTA Communities Act. And the third thing, it just deals with the frankly, the mileage of the town. Any community under 2 square miles would be exempt.
So what I wonder is, what's the level of support for that? Do you have a Senate co-sponsor for that? And how many co-sponsors do you have in the House?
Those are House bills. There's about a dozen co-sponsors. Each bill varies. The outright repeal, there's the smaller number. There's about a dozen. We've got a bicameral caucus of House and Senate, right. Democrat and Republican members that have an anti-3A caucus where we've worked. But I'll be blunt. I'm not optimistic that they're going to go anywhere through the process, because the Speaker came out and said, and the Senate President, but the Speaker very directly said, Milton is getting screwed. And we're not going to change the law anyway. So
if your bills are there, but they don't have much, by your own description, have much chance of passage, should the town be waiting on that as the thing that sort of they wait for and before they do something? Because right now the town is ineligible for categories of state money that are important to the town.
The town was compliant with 3A. I mean, this is the problem. Any discussion like this has to be based on truth. Okay. In the pro-development crowd in this town, because there's a distinction between the so-called pro-3A people and the pro-development crowd. There are some people that they're just dying to get their hooks into the town to build wherever they can. Right. And anybody that lives here knows, try to leave town in the morning. The traffic is unbearable. Right. It's getting worse. And the idea that we're going to build hundreds of new units, we're already building new units, right. But we're doing it at a pace that we think that our boards, committees, and commissions believe is sustainable. But the pro-development crowd are out there, they get this silly fake newspaper that they've created online, and they don't disclose, well, I work for a developer. Mm-hmm. The person that's running that newspaper doesn't say, I'm a paid developer person. Okay. I want to develop in your town. I want to develop in our town. And they go out there and they put this newspaper out and say, oh, we lost $1.2 million in grants. It's a total lie. I mean, the simple fact is they lost eligibility for grants. The year before, year and a half before, the MVP2 grant, the town of Winthrop was fully compliant with 3A.
Right.
That's an undisputed fact. And we were denied the grant.
Right.
So then they go out and they say more lies, and they say, well, the reason we were denied is because the state anticipated we were going to not comply, and they wanted to send a message.
Right.
Well, I have too much respect for Governor Healy and Lieutenant Governor Driscoll to think that they would be so petty as to direct their personnel to do that.
How about what is the total amount of grant money the town gets from the state in an average year, and how much of that money is 3A vulnerable?
Well, I mean, now there's probably a dozen or so grants, maybe 15 grants that are 3A dependent.
Yeah.
And some of it will depend. I mean, the reality is we hit a high point of grant money in this town for a few years back for one reason.
DeLeo.
Speaker DeLeo was there, and Speaker DeLeo delivered for the town of Winthrop.
Yeah.
He delivered with tens of millions of dollars for Winthrop Beach. He delivered millions of dollars for Winthrop Center. I mean, across the town, millions of dollars were put in because of his leadership.
Right.
And so now you replace him, you replace Senator Boncory, you replace before that Senate President Travellini with Senator Edwards and I, and both are still junior members of the legislature. We're working to make sure we get earmarks and make sure that we can help the town, whether it's with the ferry, whether it's with sidewalk projects that the town wants, money for the schools. So we're working on those things, but the simple reality is the idea that there's going to be millions of dollars a year in grants to Winthrop if we're suddenly 3A compliant, it's just, I mean, it's in a fantasy land.
Do you accept that so you've just described the situation as binary in terms of 3A, but do you understand that there's a group in town that supports compliance with 3A but doesn't necessarily believe that the law itself is something that desirable, but to just have an attitude that we'll just comply with it because it doesn't seem to have much harm? This law, I mean, what you're talking about is potential future laws, but this law, as it is right now, they argue doesn't have much to thing. Maybe they're not actually fans of 3A, but they just say we'll just comply with it. Is that a reasonable?
I don't doubt. I think there are people of goodwill on both sides, and I think that some of the pro 3A crowd are certainly just want to comply for paper compliance because they think that suddenly, once that happens, I mean, part of me, sort of, cynically wants to say they should paper comply just to turn around and show people that they were lied to. That these people that say, oh, we're going to suddenly get millions of dollars in grants tomorrow if we comply, it'll, the truth will come out that that's just not true and they've been lied to. But what compliance to me puts us on a path of when the executive office and the secretary suddenly decide we no longer think Winthrop's plan. We haven't seen Winthrop build new buildings in this area, so we're gonna say no, forget about it. We're gonna make them do something different.
Though in the case of Milton, I believe that the state has actually threatened I think they now have complied, right? But at least there was a time where they were threatening if you don't comply, we could come in and write your own zoning rules. And in the case of Winthrop, if that happened, maybe they would actually take areas that aren't already multifamily and add, like you're talking about, you don't want to put them in single family districts of the town, but the state could do that, right? I mean, first of all, the state has the right to set zoning. Is that a fundamental fact?
Well, I personally think that our Constitution gives separate powers to cities and towns under the Home Rule amendments to the Constitution. The Supreme Judicial Court has made its decision and it should be respected. But at the same time, I think that cities and towns should always be pushing back against the state trying to fundamentally destroy their communities. And that's what's happening here.
But the first
yes, the state certainly has. That's why we have 40B's been on the books since the 1970s.
So the state has the right. So even the fear is that the state will, after 3A, come in and do a worse 3A. But I mean, the state has the right to do that anyway. Is that not correct?
Well, they do if there's no pushback. I mean, you have to remember, all of this is done in the context of, 2026 is upon us. There's a gubernatorial election year. The Attorney General of the Commonwealth can rattle the saber all she wants. The question is she going to want to sue a majority Democratic town going into an election year and showing that she disrespects the will of the people of the community? And she'll then have to answer to that.
But what about the fact that you're not getting sponsors for your bill? Doesn't that suggest that if she does that, she will have the popular support? Because isn't that what's reflected in the fact that people aren't jump clamoring to repeal 3A?
No, I think, for example, I mean, number one, there's a lot of hypocrisy. Like we get lectured by people elected officials that live in Boston about why 3A is so important. But yet Boston's exempt. I haven't seen one Boston legislator file a bill to say 3A is so wonderful, we want to be a part of it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the height of hypocrisy, to tell Winthrop, you should just be good little boys and girls and comply, but yet I live across the way and I'm exempt from it. And again, numbers matter. Winthrop's population today is what it was in 1950, give or take 100 people.
Right.
The city of Boston's population today, from 1950 to 2020, is 125,000 people less.
Okay.
Those are facts by the U.S. Census. Boston has not done its part. Boston's been part of the problem. When they say we need 225,000 new units, well, go build more 125,000 units in Boston, put those people in there, and you'll solve half the problem.
Right.
But no, we don't want to do that because they're exempt.
Yeah, no, that's a good. That's
But again, and I don't see any of the developer side. I mean, going out there and demanding. Again, not one elected official in the city of Boston has come out that I've seen demanding that they comply with that they be a part of 3A.
So the second part of the question I asked a little bit ago was is Winthrop taking the risk the state might? I mean, you talked about suing, but could the state just declare that declare a zoning map for?
No, they can't. I mean, even the Attorney General, in her hubris, has come out and said that she would have to go and file a court action against the town. She'd have to file and ask the court to appoint a special master to try to come up with a plan. Okay. She doesn't unilaterally have the right to do that.
Right, right. You also represent Revere. This doesn't seem to have been an issue as much in Revere. Do you have a thought on why?
Yeah, I mean, because the city of Revere has had numerous elections over the last 20 years where they've repeatedly elected mayors that support development and support large development. And they had, let's face it, they had large areas of untapped land that they could build, unlike Winthrop. And so Revere made a decision, in the last election. Pat Keefe said, hey, we need more development. I support development. Dan Rizzo ran and wasn't for development. And so the people elected Pat. And so knowing that there was a clear distinction between the two. And so Revere has come out and said, we welcome development. And, at some point there'll be pushback from people. You'll hear pushback periodically, but not at a large level because, most of the building has been Suffolk Downs, Revere Beach. And so you're not directly affecting the large masses of the people. But as development continues, at some point, they'll say, okay, hey, we've done our part. We've gone from 37,000 people in 1950 to 70,000 people in Revere now. They've done their part.
Well, but by that measure, though, Winthrop hasn't, right? Because you said, as you pointed out, Winthrop has been the steady, and that's fine if people want to be here, but is that actually turning out to be affordable for Winthrop? I mean, it sounds like we're having some pretty serious budget issues here in town. Maybe we could use a little more something. I mean, whatever it is.
But we are. I mean, and this is the fundamental. This is the fundamental problem with 3A, is that it doesn't take into account, for example, the old Kirby Funeral Home has been torn down, and under our existing law, there's I don't know how many 20, 30, 40 units that's going to be built on that site. Winthrop's doing its part. There's approximately 100 units that are sort of in the pipeline already that are coming into Winthrop. Because the secretary and because the folks at the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities don't want to take into account individual freedom and decision making in town and want to jam the stuff down their throat, they say, well, none of that counts towards our plan. And that's a problem. None of those units we don't get any credit for any of those units.
Well, that's our choice, though. The plan for Winthrop could include that. We've just chosen to do a way that seems to be more simple, but it gets us there essentially.
Well, if it's our choice, I would turn around and I'd zone out 4/10 of a mile of Winthrop that's a runway, and I'd zone that for high-rise apartments and say, go ahead.
And that sounds like a fun.
Take it back.
What stops us from doing that? Can we do that?
Because of course then the state will say, oh, we can't. I mean, it's the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities is not an honest broker in how they're handling this process. It's regrettable. I don't think they're adequately and accurately reflecting the good person that the governor is and her style of leadership. And I think that, frankly, the whole place should be cleaned house and they should start from scratch.
Okay. We've been on housing almost the whole time, but there's still, believe it or not, still a couple more things to ask you about on that. One is the ADUs. You mentioned ADUs, which are auxiliary dwelling units.
Accessory dwelling units.
Accessory dwelling, okay. They're basically small little, like think of your a garage that you make into a home. That apparently will have a fairly limited effect. It's, first of all, it's required across the state. It will apparently have fairly limited effect in Winthrop because large parts of the town are excluded because of being in a floodplain. You voted in favor of that provision, right?
I voted in favor of the final bill. I filed amendments to get rid of it. I filed amendments to make it so that it would be that it would have to be owner occupied, and none of those were accepted by the House.
Okay, but you voted for the
I voted for the final housing bill, which included that provision.
What did you want in the bill then that you got that was worthwhile?
I mean, there was all kinds of money for veterans housing in the bill. There's billions of dollars. There's $2 billion to revitalize housing authorities around the Commonwealth. So the housing authority I grew up in Revere, my teen years, isn't people living there are living in squalor.
Right.
Despite the best efforts of the executive director there, the place looks terrible. Because there's just not enough state money. Now we've made that money available. So that housing authorities can go for that money and actually can help people. Same thing with encouraging, rather than hitting people over the head with a hammer. We put this $5 billion in that bond bill. That as part of that bond bill, we made money available to encourage cities and towns to build and to partner with private property owners to build. So there's so much in the bill that I liked. And every bill that gets passed, you got to decide: do I like more than I dislike?
So you were talking earlier about out-of-town developers, and this. So what's the distinction you're making between the fact that you support this kind of construction in ways that help people and what you see they're doing? I mean, aren't some of these construction people or development people that you're talking about seeking the same basic thing that you're talking about here?
Well, I think, for example, like the builder, I'm not going to call it names, but the builder that's doing the Kirby project lives in town, understands the town. He's in our coffee shops every day. He knows the problems we face with traffic. He knows what works in Winthrop and what doesn't. He's not some out-of-towner looking to come in, build this monstrosity, cash out, and then leave.
I see.
He's someone that's vested in the town. Same thing, some of the projects that happen in the center, or that could happen in the center. That, a lot of those properties are owned by a local Winthrop family that believe in the town.
So then on ADUs are obviously local because it's your own house. So what's the problem then with that? Which is, if I have a house and I have a garage and I want to have my grandmother live in there or my child live in there, that's me local.
And you and I are on the same page on that.
Okay.
But the law's not. And that's the problem. That's why I'm opposed to them. I think they're terrible. I think they're going to be worse for this town than the MBTA Communities Act. So the ADU law has no requirement. They sold it to the public that, oh, this is for a granny flat, this is for a sick kid. But truth be told, when it came out, there's no restriction, there's no requirement that the property be owner occupied, there's no requirement that the person living in the ADU be a family member. And so the United States Senate, under Senator Ron Wyden, when he was the chairman of the Finance Committee, was doing a study on Georgia and Florida's homeownership market where not venture capital, but where hedge funds were buying up single-family homes, putting ADUs in, and basically making them rental properties. And what it does is, because they get to claim depreciation, because they get to do certain write-offs that you and I as a homeowner wouldn't be able to do, it drives up the cost of housing and it pushes people out. That's what's going to happen. The other part of this on the ADU law, though, if I could, is the regulations that the Secretary put in place go far beyond. It's not just single-family homes that can add this 900 square feet. You could have a 2-family, and you can add an ADU and make it into a 3-family under this law, or a 3 to a 4.
But in Winthrop, I mean, I hear what you're saying about Georgia and wherever else, but that's not the case here in Winthrop, isn't it? Aren't most homes in Winthrop owned by the people who live there or locally owned?
Well, 37% of our homes are single-family homes in this town, which means 63% are not single-family homes. And then even the single-family home, like for example, I had a realtor say to me, if you convert your garage into an ADU, you could probably get $3,000 a month in rent for that. So now I look at it and I say, well, geez, if I do an ADU, I collect $3,000 a month. Now I can start depreciating my home because now it's a business. So I can depreciate my home. I'm going to save a bunch of money on taxes. Now when I go to if I ever go to sell my house, what happens? My house is worth a lot more now. I've driven up the cost of the house because when Paul Baskin comes in and says, oh, I want a house on Court Road, well, I can get $3,000 a month in rent, so I can afford to pay $200,000 more because I'll get depreciation and I'll get the rent. And so what you're going to do is you're going to see that you're going to drive up the cost of housing in this town once ADUs become more and more, again, as a philosophical matter for sick relatives, for kids, I'm all for it.
Right.
But having no restriction in the law and then expanding it beyond single-family homes to every property, I think the only exemption is an industrial area, which doesn't account for us. But every other part of the town, you can put an ADU in,
Okay.
up to 900 square feet.
So there's a lot of, I'd like to, there's so
be
many other things I
episode
want to
4.
catch you on. Yeah. Part of the 3A thing has led into the recall effort against the town council member, Max Tassinari. The state has gotten involved because the state, I guess, has a role in this because they oversee to some degree some of these campaigns. It sounds like that the state has said that the recall effort doesn't have any merit and it should end. In fact, I think it has ended because it's too late to change the ballot now. Do you briefly have any take on that and sort of the whole issue, both the legal nuts and bolts of it and just sort of what it says about the town and our ability to talk to each other right now?
Yeah, I mean, listen, over 2,000 people stood up and signed petitions to do a recall. Mm-hmm. Whether that threshold is a higher number that the clerk initially ruled, whether it's a lower number that the clerk later ruled, is, that's something that ultimately will be decided. It was decided by the Board of Registrars.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm a rule of law guy. I think that we have in place a system that talks about how we're supposed to respect the rule of law and how the process works. Every day in the United States of America since January, colleges, universities, nonprofits have sued the Trump administration because they've stopped giving out grants, so they've pulled back grants. And every day they've gone into federal court and the U.S. district courts, it's a little technical, but I'll be quick. The U.S. district courts the Solicitor General has said, you don't have jurisdiction. It has to be heard by the specialized court called the Federal Court of Claims.
Right.
And 100% of the time the district courts have said, no, we're going to hear it, and we're going to order you to give the grant.
Okay.
And then 100% of the time the losing party, in this case the administration, has had to sue. And almost 100% of the time, the appeals courts or the Supreme Court has said, no, the district court had no jurisdiction. You have to go to the Court of Claims.
Okay.
To me, our Board of Registrars made a decision, whether they got it right or wrong. I haven't read I don't even know if they issued a written decision.
Right.
Whatever their decision, I think should have been respected, and the process should have gone to the Superior Court, which is what the law calls for. I think, the Secretary of State's office getting involved in something that they really have no jurisdiction over, right. I think was a mistake.
And you think that there's an issue of whether the town's Board of Registrars had any jurisdiction over it too?
But I think that's something that the Superior Court, again, I don't know, I don't do election, I don't practice election law. Right. I think that the Secretary of State's, the courts should have decided that issue at the Superior Court level.
I see. And do you have any issue with the 3 members, the appointed members of the Board of Registrars also being part of the recall effort? Is that?
I mean, I don't know enough. Were they actively part of the recall, or did they just sign? I heard that they signed the recall.
All 3 signed, and I gather at least one of them was somehow more active than that.
I mean, I think that then raises the question whether they should have made disclosures or not. But it's a small town. People are going to sign petitions or not sign petitions. Right. I'm not concerned if they signed. But if they were actively involved, then I think that's something that certainly should have been disclosed.
We're so short on time, but I want to hear you on the big issue in town, of course, is it remains in this country and in this town, immigration and the ICE enforcement. Do you feel that the town is, by and large, getting it right? I'm talking about the town government, I'm talking about the school system, I'm talking about the police department. Do you think they're generally handling this well?
Yeah, I mean, I think the town isn't out. We don't enforce immigration law here in the town of Winthrop. It's not the job of the town government. It's certainly not the job of our town police. But I think we had that incident where 2 people were picked up by ICE. It obviously caused a lot of trauma to some of the community members, but also to the more what I concerned about the families themselves. Mm-hmm. And so. But it's somewhat beyond the scope of the town's decision making. I mean, when the federal government doesn't care what Winthrop says about immigration, the laws are the laws. We have Congresswoman Clark as the 2nd highest ranking Democrat. If the Democrats take back the House next year, then they'll be in a position to try to change the law to cut back on some of the excesses. I mean, I think the administration, when they first got in, said they were going to go after people with violent records and final laws of deportation. I personally think that was a pretty good balance. Yeah. Picking up people off the street for the sake of picking them up, I just think I think that's a misguided approach.
Yeah. The country went through a trauma not too long ago with the Charlie Kirk situation, and there was an event here in town. You spoke at it. That was obviously a horrific tragedy, but there's also questions as to the degree to which the American people should or should not be celebrating this particular person and his record. You spoke at that event. You didn't really talk about him as a person. You talked about just about the need to reduce political violence, that kind of thing. Can you maybe just explain why you went to that event and what why that event, why that forum to deliver that message?
Because Paul Caruccio, the chairman of the Republican Town Committee, called me and said, I'm concerned about what's going on in society. I'd like to do a rally sort of saying Winthrop says no to violence. Would you participate? Absolutely, I would.
Right.
And then ultimately he and Steve Ruggiero worked it out, where I think Steve Ruggiero, on behalf of the Democratic Town Committee, sort of went there in solidarity, which I thought was quite classy.
Right.
And to me, it was an opportunity to stand up and say, we need to do better. I mean, I referred people to Robert Kennedy's Mindless Menace of Violence speech after Martin Luther King got killed, and I urge people to watch it on YouTube. It's about 10 minutes long, and it really, the challenge that Robert Kennedy talked about in '68 are the challenges we're facing today. This is not an unusual time period, because it happened, again, what was going on in the 60s, is sort of repeating itself here. But I think we need to stand up. I think the internet's made it worse. I think, people, I think I told the story to you, and I know we're short on time, but real quick is, somebody sent, one of my college fraternity brothers posted some silly thing on my Facebook page about evil liberals or some foolish thing. And so somebody that's not a Facebook friend went on and posted, do you believe this is appropriate for somebody to put on your page? You allow it there.
Right.
So I looked at that person's page, and they have this meme showing somebody that person disagreed with swastikas all over their body like they're a Nazi. I'm like, we need to stop that. Like, the Nazi Party is not alive in the United States. People are not fascist because we disagree with their views.
Right.
We can say we disagree with people's political views and how they want to get stuff done, and not demonize them. I work every day with 159 members of the House that I disagree with on a lot of issues, but we find common ground when we can. Right. I'm proud of the fact that, Senator Edwards and I always talk about the fact we don't agree on a lot ideologically, but we work together on issues we can find common ground. And we all have a duty to stand up and say, stop, this is not okay. It's not okay that Speaker Hortzman and her husband were gunned down at their home. It's not okay that Charlie Kirk was gunned down because of his speech. But there's so many other things. It's not okay that little kids were gunned down in their schools, or going to back to school mass, or this young Ukrainian girl. It's just what a tragic statement of the affairs of our society, that girl, that Ukrainian gal, 23 years old, gets stabbed, and you watch that video and you see 3 people around her. Not one of them reached out to her to comfort her. Yeah. As she was bleeding to death. Not one of them picked up the phone and called. I mean, it's what are we doing as a society? And so I think when Paul called me, I said, you know what? This is just getting worse and worse, and we as leaders have a duty to stand up, and say enough.
Just the one thing that raises in my mind too, among many things, but one is with the fact that the Republican Party called you. You're a Democrat, but do you feel fully aligned with the Democratic Party? Are you sort of thinking of the other party at all?
No, absolutely. I'm a Democrat. I'm a working class Democrat. That's why when I try to fight for lower electricity rates and gas rates for people to cool and to heat their homes, that's why when I fought to lower the gas tax, I think that I like to consider myself an Ed King type of Democrat. Okay. Ed King, for governor from this town. On the more moderate side, working class, representing working class people, not the money class. So the reality of today of some of the leadership of the Democratic Party at the national level, it's the rich money class that could give a damn about the working class men and women that I'm proud to represent. And I think it shows a lot about the character of Paul Caruccio, that he wanted to reach out and make the event bipartisan by asking me to come and speak. Yeah. And the fact that he reached out to Steve Ruggiero and said, hey, so if you I don't really care who it is that comes out and says, will you participate in a rally against violence? Right. I'm going to speak at that rally.
So just one last thing before we go, because Charlie Kirk, one of the things he was known for was a belief in religion sort of informing democratic rule. I hope I'm not mischaracterizing, but I know he felt strongly that there was some religious role. And I know I want you to answer this, but I just want to tell people, if they don't know, that you take your religious faith quite seriously. You've been to Rome. Can you maybe just tell us what you see as the dividing line between religion in government?
I don't think it's something you can answer in a 30-second answer. I mean, it's a complicated question, but I think, people elect me or elect their elected officials, and they know you elect them. It goes back to the Edmund Burke philosophical debate. Do you elect me so that I'm going to vote whatever the majority wants, or do you elect my conscience? And so I think people voted for me, and they vote for my conscience. And if I vote enough times against the collective will of the people because my conscience commands me to do it, then the people will throw me out. But some people will say, look, I don't agree with you, Jeff, on this issue or on that issue, but overall, I agree on the fact that, I agree with you on these 7 out of 10 issues or 8 out of 10 issues. And, I'm proud of the fact that my decision-making is guided by my faith. And I'll just give you one, if I could, one example. When we were talking about, and it caught some people by surprise, when we were talking in our members-only caucus about the right to shelter law in the Commonwealth, and we spent $1.3 billion that the Biden administration sat when they let 10 million people come in the border, completely open border, 10 million people, they saddled Massachusetts with a $1.3 billion debt, and they gave us $2 million. So we're in our caucus, and one of my more progressive colleagues stands up and says, Mr. Speaker, I can't believe I'm saying this as a lifelong progressive, but we need to change the law and say you have to live in the Commonwealth for X number of months before we give you the right to shelter. So I raised my hand, and some of my colleagues look at, what's he going to say? And I stood up. I said, Mr. Speaker, I'm a Democrat, but I'm a Roman Catholic first, and I will be damned if I vote to put women and children on the street. We have a moral obligation to take care of these people in their time of need. Now, at the same time, I think we should be coming out, and this is what I said, I think we should be coming out and bashing the people in Washington for betraying the country by allowing this to happen and betraying the states. But it's not the fault of the Haitian woman I met that morning, at Revere City Hall, who's holding a newborn child, who just wants to find a place to sleep and get some food. It's not her fault that the Biden administration created this mess, and so I made it clear that my faith drove me to say, ideology aside, this is about caring for the poor, caring for the needy, and if somebody says they're offended by that, so particularly somebody on the right that says they're offended by that, then I'm not your guy. I'm going to be guided by my conscience.
Well, Representative Turco, I want to thank you again. We always want to talk a lot more than we have time for when you're on, and it's a great honor and privilege to have you here. So thank you.
I want to thank you. This is such a great thing that you do. You get a great. We've talked. I remember the first time we talked in my office, just by happenstance, and had a really good discussion. And the fact that you do this for the community is really a service to the community. Particularly if people know your background, working in DC or UPI. I just think the fact that you care enough about the community to get involved and have these discussions, we're very fortunate to have you, even if we don't agree on the issues. I think it's a great opportunity for the public to hear people, and you make it happen.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.